Hello. Write in the comments where you're from. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Enjoy listening. On her son's 9th birthday, her husband announced, "This is not my child." His mother backed him up and called her a whore. Amber silently looked at them and did what she should have done 9 years ago. The next day he was screaming into the phone, "Amber, what have you done? Let's get our son back." But before those words came through the receiver, there was that day, that celebration, that was supposed to be the happiest of the year. Instead, it became the last day of her old life. The party was in full swing. Sunlight filled the spacious living room of their country house, dancing on crystal glasses and silverware. The air smelled of freshly baked cake, flowers, and the pure joy of children. Amber Lyons, the perfect hostess, floated among the guests, making sure glasses were full, kids were entertained, and the music wasn't too loud. A flawless smile played on her lips, but inside, a heavy unease had been growing for hours. Her son, Cody, was the center of this little universe. Today he turned 9. Blonde, with serious eyes, he proudly showed his friends the new game console, a gift from his parents. He laughed, and that laughter meant more to Amber than anything in the world. For that laughter, she had given up her career as an architect, her ambitions, her freedom. She had become the perfect wife to Keith Lyons and the perfect daughter-in-law to his mother, Patricia, the Iron Lady who ruled not only the family but also half of the city's construction business. The guests matched the family, powerful, wealthy. Business partners, city officials with their wives, bank directors. Each toast sounded like a vow of loyalty to the Lyons clan. Amber nodded, smiled, accepted compliments about her home and her son. All the while, she kept glancing at her husband. Keith wasn't sharing the joy. He stood by the makeshift bar in the corner, drinking. Not celebrating, mourning. Grim, deliberate, pouring whiskey with a heavy hand. He barely looked at his son. When Cody ran up to show him a gift, Keith just ruffled his hair absent-mindedly and turned away, back to his glass. Amber felt a chill. This had been going on for months, his detachment, his irritation, his drinking, darker and more frequent each time. Beside him, Patricia stood like a statue. In her strict burgundy suit she looked like a general inspecting her troops. She didn't drink, barely ate, only sent cold, calculating glances around the room. Amber noticed her mother-in-law whispering firmly into Keith's ear. He listened with his head bowed, then drained another glass in one gulp. Something was about to happen. Amber felt it in her skin. She tried to pull Keith away, but he brushed her off like an annoying fly. Finally, the moment came. A giant cake decorated with superhero figures was brought in. The kids screamed with excitement, crowding around the table. Amber lit 9 candles, and their flames flickered in dozens of eyes. "Make a wish, sweetheart," she whispered to Cody, hugging him. The room filled with voices singing "Happy Birthday to You." Cody shut his eyes, took a deep breath, and blew out all the candles at once. The guests cheered. He laughed, happy and carefree. For that moment, he was just a regular 9-year-old boy on his birthday. And then the silence was shattered by a sharp, deafening crash. Keith. He stood in the middle of the room, swaying. His glass was gone, shattered into 1,000 pieces at his feet. Whiskey spread across the pale floor in a dark stain. The chatter died instantly. The music stopped. Children clung to their parents. In the dead quiet, Keith's ragged, heavy breathing was the only sound. His face was crimson, his eyes cloudy and burning with rage. Amber froze with the cake knife in her hand. The whole world narrowed down to her husband's figure. She watched his hand rise slowly, his trembling finger pointing straight at Cody, who still stood by the cake with a confused smile. Keith's voice was hoarse, breaking. He coughed, then roared loud enough for the whole room, for all the powdered wives and stern men to hear, "He's not my son." The words hit Amber like a slap. The air left her lungs. She saw the guests' faces stretch in shock, someone gasp, others quickly look away, pretending they hadn't heard. But they all had. They all saw. The little world she had built so carefully for 9 years was crumbling before her eyes, burying her under the rubble. Cody stopped smiling. He looked at his father with wide, frightened eyes, not understanding. Then Patricia stepped forward. She didn't rush. Every step was measured, heavy with meaning. She reached her son, placed a firm, commanding hand on his shoulder, and looked, not at him, but straight at Amber. Her gaze was icy, naked contempt. The gaze of a victor. "We've known for a long time she's a whore," Patricia said loudly and clearly, making sure everyone heard. Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't accusing, she was delivering a verdict. Whore. That single filthy word crushed her completely. It nailed her to the pillar of shame before the whole city. Amber felt the blood drain from her face. She felt dozens of curious, judgmental, pitying stares. The humiliation was physical, it choked, it burned. She wanted to vanish, to scream, to cry. But then she looked at Cody, his pale face, his trembling lip. And she knew she couldn't allow herself to break. Not now. Something inside her snapped. The icy shock turned into the same icy, burning fury. 9 years of fear. 9 years of lies. 9 years of being a puppet in the hands of that woman in the burgundy suit. Enough. She straightened her back. Lifted her chin. Her eyes locked with Patricia's, and there was no fear, no pleading left in them. Only cold, steady resolve. She slowly set the knife down on the table. Then she turned to her husband, who was still breathing hard, thrown off by her silence. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was surprisingly even and clear. It sliced through the tense silence like a scalpel. "You're right, Keith," she said. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. It was a confession. Full and undeniable. Keith blinked, his drunken certainty suddenly wavered. "Cody isn't your son." After saying that, Amber turned her gaze back to her mother-in-law. She looked Patricia straight in the eye, and for a moment, the woman no longer seemed like a stone statue. Something like confusion flickered in her eyes. Amber paused, letting everyone in the room absorb her words, then finished, pouring into each syllable the venom and pain of 9 years of lies. "But he is a Lyons. And he always has been." The riddle hung in the air. It wasn't an excuse. It was an accusation. And it wasn't aimed at the drunken, pathetic Keith, but at the powerful woman beside him, so sure of her victory. Now it was Patricia who stared at her as if she'd seen a ghost. And Amber silently met her gaze, knowing she had just pulled the trigger on a war she had been waiting for 9 long years. The seconds her words hung in the air felt like an eternity. The silence in the living room was thick, almost tangible. Then the world exploded. Not with shouting. Something worse. Quiet, panicked escape. The mayor's wife was the first to break. A plump woman in pearls suddenly remembered urgent business, grabbed her purse, and without looking at the hosts, scurried toward the door, dragging her husband with her. The others followed, as if on cue. It looked like rats fleeing a sinking ship. No goodbyes. Just averted eyes, hurried whispers to their companions, coats and jackets thrown on in haste. Their faces showed a mix of curiosity, disgust, and fear of being dragged into someone else's filthy scandal. The Lyons family, only half an hour ago the center of admiration, had turned into something contagious, toxic. Amber stood still, watching the exodus. She didn't feel ashamed. Only cold. She saw parents rushing their children out, casting frightened glances at Cody, who stood frozen by the cake like a little stone statue. The party was dead. The colorful balloons hanging from the ceiling suddenly looked tacky and ridiculous, and the untouched cake, like a funeral wreath. When the door slammed behind the last guest, the living room felt enormous and empty. And in that emptiness Keith finally broke. The drunken stupor vanished, replaced with rage and bewilderment. "What did you say?" he growled, stepping toward Amber. His eyes were bloodshot. "What do you mean, Lyons? You cheated on me with someone in my family?" "Who?" He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin. But Amber didn't even flinch. Her eyes were fixed on Cody. The boy shivered at his father's shout and began to cry quietly, covering his face with his hands. "Keith, stop!" Patricia ordered sharply. She stepped between them, pushing her son back. "Not in front of the child. We'll deal with this later." "No, I want to know now." Keith was out of control. He shoved his mother aside. "She's disgraced me. Disgraced the whole family." "What are you saying, Amber? Explain yourself." Amber stayed silent. She carefully pulled her arm free and stepped toward her son. Kneeling in front of him, she took his hands away from his tear-streaked face and said softly, "Come on, sweetheart, let's pack our things." Cody looked at her through tear-filled eyes, confused, but nodded and clung to her hand like a lifeline. "Pack your things? Where?" Keith roared. "You're not going anywhere. And you're not taking my son." Amber ignored him. She stood up, holding Cody's hand, and calmly headed for the stairs. "Amber, I order you to stop." Patricia's voice rang with steel. "You'll stay here and explain yourself. You will not walk out." Amber didn't even turn her head. She just kept walking. Every step up the staircase was a step out of the suffocating cage she had lived in for 9 years. She could feel their rage behind her, their helplessness against her sudden, inexplicable calm. In the bedroom, she pulled a big travel bag from the top shelf and tossed it onto the bed. She moved with methodical precision, without panic. First Cody's things: jeans, sweaters, t-shirts, underwear. His favorite teddy bear, the one he couldn't sleep without. His tablet. The charger. Then her own. No evening gowns, no jewelry. Just the essentials: jeans, a warm sweater, a couple of blouses, documents, and every last dollar in cash from the dresser drawer. She moved like a machine, and that mechanical rhythm saved her from collapsing onto the floor and screaming. Cody sat on the bed, silently watching. He wasn't crying anymore, just quietly sniffling. The bedroom door burst open. Keith stood in the doorway, Patricia's shadow looming behind him. "What are you doing? I asked you." His voice was lower now, but even more threatening. "You think I'll let you walk out? After this? You've ruined my life." Amber zipped Cody's bag, then hers. She lifted them, one in each hand. "You're not leaving this house," he repeated, blocking the doorway. "You're my wife." She disgraced the lion's name, Patricia added coldly from behind his shoulder. "She has nothing. No job, no money. Where would she go? The street?" Let her think again. Amber looked at them. At her husband, his face twisted with drunken rage. At her mother-in-law, who stared back with cold calculation, convinced she had her cornered. She didn't answer them. She just took Cody's hand and walked straight toward Keith. He didn't move. For a moment, it seemed like he might hit her. But she looked him dead in the eyes, and all he saw there was emptiness. He stepped aside. Just one step, letting her pass as if she were invisible. She carried the heavy bags down the stairs, Cody at her side, clutching her hand. Downstairs, in the wrecked living room, the air reeked of whiskey and misery. By the front door, she slipped Cody's jacket on him, then put on her own. Nobody tried to stop her. They stood at the top of the stairs, two dark figures, silently watching her go. The night was cold. Amber settled Cody into the car, buckled him in, tossed the bags onto the back seat. She got behind the wheel. Key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. She didn't look back at the house she'd called her own for 9 years. She just pressed the gas and drove through the gates, taking her son into the unknown. She didn't go to friends. She wouldn't risk dragging them into this. She didn't go to her parents in another state. She wouldn't alarm them yet. Instead, she pulled into the first roadside motel outside the city. A tiny room with 2 narrow beds and the smell of damp. Cody, exhausted, fell asleep almost instantly, clutching his teddy bear. Amber didn't sleep. She sat in a chair by the window, staring into the darkness, replaying Patricia's last words in her head. The war had begun, and there was no way back. In the morning, the furious vibration of her phone on the nightstand woke her. Keith. His name lit up the screen, and her heart pounded. She forced herself to answer. There was silence on the line for several seconds. Then she heard his voice. And it was different. Not drunk. Not angry. Broken. Frightened. "Amber," he rasped. "Amber, what have you done? Where are you? Please, come back." She listened to his ragged breathing, saying nothing. "Mom, she explained everything to me," he rushed on. "Well, not everything. She said it was a medical decision. That we had no choice. She said it was for the family. Amber, I didn't know. She made me think it was different. I was wrong. Forgive me. Come back. Let's raise our son together. Our son." Those words struck her harder than yesterday's "he's not my son." Patricia had already started her work. She'd fed Keith some twisted half-truth, some ugly distortion, to pull him back onto her side, to lure her runaway daughter-in-law back into the cage. Amber didn't say a word. She just pressed the end call button. She woke Cody, washed his face, got him dressed. They ate a silent breakfast in the motel cafe, stale rolls and nothing more. Then she loaded him back into the car, but she didn't drive back to the city. And she didn't take the highway out of town. She turned toward the most prestigious, most private neighborhood in the city. The place where the kind of people lived for whom the Lyons family were just business peers. Perfect lawns, tall fences, cameras on every post. She drove slowly, confidently, as if she knew the way by heart. The car stopped in front of the boldest, most modern house on the street. Glass, dark metal, minimalist design. A place that looked like both a fortress and a work of art. Amber knew who lived here. The whole city knew. She turned off the ignition and looked at Cody. "We're here. Let's go." She stepped out, took his hand, and walked to the massive metal door. On the wall beside it was a small engraved plaque, Lyons, N. Nathan. Keith's younger brother. Successful, charming, his mother's favorite. Amber took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. A sharp, melodic chime cut through the morning silence. She stood on the doorstep, holding her frightened boy's hand, and waited. The war was entering its second phase. Footsteps inside. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly, soundlessly, like a portal to another world. Nathan stood there. Not the Nathan Amber was used to seeing at family gatherings in a tailored suit with a smug smile. This Nathan was casual, relaxed. A cashmere coffee-colored sweater, simple pants, barefoot. A steaming cup of coffee in his hand. He saw Amber and froze for a second. His face, a moment ago calm with morning ease, didn't change. He just looked at her, then at Cody clinging to her hand. Then his gaze shifted back to Amber, and in his eyes came recognition. And with it, horror. Pure, primal horror. The smile vanished, his cup trembled, and a few drops of coffee splattered onto the fine fabric. "Amber?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What? What are you doing here?" He didn't really ask. He breathed it out. His eyes darted down the empty street, checking if anyone had seen. Amber said nothing. She just stood there, looking at him. At the biological father of her son. At the golden boy of the Lyons family, whose perfect life was about to crack wide open. "Come in," he muttered quickly, his voice still tight. "Hurry." He backed deeper into the vast, light-filled hall, almost shoving them inside. The door closed behind them with a soft, expensive click, shutting them off from the outside world. The hall looked like something out of a design magazine. High ceiling, white walls, a huge abstract painting, a staircase of glass and steel leading to the second floor. Not a single extra detail, not a speck of dust. The silence was sterile, cold. Cody clung to Amber, wide-eyed at the strange, cavernous space. "Mom, where are we?" "Quiet, sweetheart." "It's okay," she whispered, her eyes fixed on Nathan. He set his cup down on a glass console and turned to her. His face was pale, his forehead damp with sweat. All his polish, all his charm was gone. Standing before her was just a frightened man. What he spoke fast, in a whisper, as if afraid someone might overhear them even in this enormous house. I got a call from Mother. She said there was a scandal at the birthday." "That you left? Why did you come here?" "Where else was I supposed to go, Nathan?" Her voice was calm, and that calm against his panic seemed to scare him even more. "You know why I'm here, don't you?" "Amber, listen, this is crazy, you can't. What do you want?" "Money? Do you need money? Tell me how much, I'll arrange it right now. I'll buy you an apartment in another city, a car, whatever you want." Just he broke off, fumbling for words. "Just as long as this stays quiet. I have a family, Amber. Do you understand?" He stepped closer. His eyes darted, full of pleading. "We had an agreement. 9 years ago. It was our decision. For the family. For Keith. I helped. I did what they asked me to do. Helped." The word rang hollow in that sterile silence. Amber looked at this man who was now ready to do anything to save his own skin. 9 years ago, he'd been the same, confident, smiling, persuading her it was the right choice, the only option. Then he'd erased it from his life, leaving her alone to live with a ticking bomb. "This isn't about money, Nathan," she said firmly. She placed a hand on Cody's shoulder, feeling him tremble. "This is about him. Yesterday, the man he's called his father for 9 years disowned him in front of everyone. They called him the child of adultery. And his mother, a whore. This is about his name, his honor. Not your money. Honor? Name?" His voice almost rose to a shout, but he caught himself and sank back into a venomous whisper. "You'll ruin everything. You'll destroy his life. They'll mock him at school, point fingers. Is that what you want for him? Leave, Amber. Take the money and leave before it's too late. That's the best way. For everyone. Especially for him." He was so persuasive. So rational. Anyone else in her place might have agreed, take the money, start over somewhere far away where no one knew their secret. But when she looked at her son, at his frightened face, she knew running wasn't an answer. It would be another betrayal. Above all, of herself. "No," she said simply. That short word silenced him. He stared at her, torn between despair and fury. "You don't understand what you're doing," he whispered. "You're selfish. You only think about He didn't finish. The glass staircase that had seemed just part of the decor suddenly came alive. A woman was descending, tall, slender, dressed in an elegant cream-colored lounge set. Her blonde hair pulled into a flawless knot. No makeup, yet beautiful with that cold, refined beauty that needed no decoration. Paige, Nathan's wife. She moved slowly, with a feline grace. Her sharp gray eyes studied the strange scene in her hall. She saw her pale, rattled husband. She saw an unfamiliar woman with a tired but determined face. And she saw the little boy clinging to her. Nathan froze like a thief caught red-handed. Instinctively, he stepped aside from Amber, as if to break the invisible link between them. Paige stopped at the last step. She didn't raise her voice, didn't make a scene. She just looked at all three of them with a long, measured gaze. Then her eyes fixed on her husband. "Nathan," her voice was calm, but laced with steel. "This woman looks like she's running from a fire. And you look like the one who started it." She paused, letting her words settle into the tense silence. Then she turned her piercing gaze on Amber and finished, not to her husband, but to the air itself. "Who is she?" Nathan went rigid. His face turned into a mask of horror. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Any lie, any half-truth would sound pathetic now. He was caught. The secret he'd fought so hard to lock inside these walls had broken free, standing before him in the form of his own wife, demanding an answer. Paige's question hung in the sterile air like a sentence. Nathan stood frozen, his face a lifeless white mask. He looked at his wife, terror plain in his eyes, so raw that lying was useless. Amber saw Paige's gaze shift from her husband to her, then to Cody. The woman's cold gray eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't like Patricia. She didn't wield blunt power. Her strength was different, quiet, surgical. Like a doctor making one precise cut to open an abscess. This Nathan began, his voice strange and hoarse. This is my brother's wife, Paige. Amber. They're having problems. She just came here. Problems? Paige slowly, almost lazily, arched an eyebrow. She didn't look at Amber, she pinned her husband with her stare. Your brother has problems, but you're the one looking like you're about to have a heart attack. Those are very strange problems, Nathan. Amber realized she had to step in. This wasn't her fight. Her goal wasn't to destroy Nathan's marriage, but to make him understand that his perfect world was no longer an unbreakable fortress. I won't keep you long, she said, addressing Paige but looking at Nathan. Her voice was steady, without a trace of deference. Nathan and I need to discuss something. Confidentially. It concerns the Lyons family. That last phrase was the key. It both explained her presence and made it all the more suspicious. Paige looked at her husband again, and the faintest bitter smile touched her lips. She understood. Maybe not the details, but the essence. Her husband was at the center of some filthy family secret. Fine, she said, unexpectedly soft. Talk. You can use Nathan's study. She turned and, without another word, climbed the glass staircase with the same graceful silence. She didn't look back. But her straight back radiated cold contempt. As soon as Paige disappeared upstairs, Nathan seemed to snap out of his daze. He grabbed Amber by the elbow and practically dragged her across the hall to a heavy dark wood door. Here, he hissed, shoving it open and pushing her and Cody inside. The study was as flawless and soulless as the rest of the house. A massive blackwood desk, a leather chair, shelves of books arranged not by title but by the color of their spines. The air smelled of expensive leather and polish. Nathan slammed the door shut and leaned against it, breathing hard. Are you insane? Did you see her? Do you even realize what you've just done? Me? Amber calmly settled Cody into one of the visitor chairs. The boy shrank into its huge leather arms. I didn't do anything, Nathan. I just came to the father of my child for answers. Quiet. He jumped toward her. Don't say that. Never. The wall's here. He began pacing the room like a caged animal. His expensive cashmere sweater suddenly looked ill-fitting. He looked pitiful. What now? Paige, she forgives nothing. She's not Keith, you can't fool her. She'll dig until she finds the truth. My life is over. He clutched his head. I have to call Mother. Only she knows what to do. He snatched his phone, his fingers trembling as he tapped the screen. He walked to the far corner of the room, turned his back, as if that could change anything. Mom? His voice cracked. It's me. Something terrible happened. She's here. At my house. With the boy. Yes, Amber. Paige saw them. What should I do? Mom, what do I do? He listened, nodding, his face growing paler by the second. Then he muttered, I understand, and hung up. He turned back to Amber, fear and hatred swirling in his eyes. Mother will take care of this, he said with a kind of desperate certainty. She'll call you. She'll fix it, like she always does. He sank into his huge desk chair, trying to look like the man in control again. But it didn't work. He was nothing more than a scared son waiting for Mommy to chase away the bullies. Amber stayed silent. She just sat beside Cody, stroking his hair, waiting. 10, maybe 15 minutes passed. The silence in the study was crushing. Then her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. She pulled it out. The screen lit up with Patricia. She looked at Nathan, then at her son. Took a deep breath and answered, switching to speaker. "I'm listening." Patricia's voice cracked through the speaker, sharp and merciless. No greeting. Just a whip. "What do you think you're doing, Amber? You want to ruin everyone's life? Yesterday's humiliation wasn't enough for you?" Amber stayed silent, letting her vent. Nathan stiffened in his chair, gripping the armrests. "I don't know what you think you're playing at, but let me explain your future," Patricia went on, her words clipped. "Right now, I'm calling your boss, Walter. By lunch, you'll have your termination notice. For incompetence. Trust me, I'll find a reason." Amber felt her fingertips go cold, but her face remained impassive. Then, her mother-in-law's voice grew even harder. "I'll make sure you never find another job in this city. Not even as a cashier. Every door will be shut to you. Your friends will stop answering your calls. You'll be an outcast. A nobody. You and your child." She paused, as if savoring the effect of her words. "But I'm not a monster. I'll give you one last offer. $500,000. Cash. Today. You take the money, sign a full non-disclosure, and disappear from this city forever. You go far away and start a new life. And never, do you hear me, never again speak the name Lyons. This is my final act of goodwill." Nathan looked at Amber with hope. For him, this was the perfect solution, simple, clear, expensive, yes, but one that would make the problem disappear. He waited for her to agree. And then Amber laughed. Softly, almost soundlessly. It wasn't a happy laugh, it was dry, short, full of contempt. Nathan flinched. On the speaker, silence hung heavy and stunned. "Your money can't buy my silence, Patricia," Amber said calmly, her voice ringing sharp and clear in the sterile office. "And your threats mean nothing." "What?" Patricia hissed. "What nonsense are you spouting? Have you lost your mind? I've been in my right mind for 9 years. Ever since that day. Because I kept everything." "What did you keep?" Patricia's voice cracked with confusion. Amber paused, letting the tension stretch to its breaking point. She looked straight into Nathan's terrified eyes. "The originals. From that private clinic. 9 years ago. Every document, with dates and names, laying out your entire scheme. Every test, every doctor's report." The line went dead silent. Nathan stopped breathing. "And do you know what's most valuable in those papers, Patricia?" Amber's voice turned to ice. "Your signature. Right there under organizing party. Yours. Not Keith's. Not mine." The silence on the other end wasn't just a pause. It was the sound of a world collapsing. The sound of a predator realizing it had been in the crosshairs all along. Power had just shifted hands. Right here, in this pristine office, in front of the biological father of her son. Then came a sharp, final click. Patricia hung up, cutting the thread. Nathan stared at Amber, no longer with panic, but with something closer to superstitious terror. As if she weren't just a woman but a ghost from the past come to claim his soul. His perfect world, his flawless life, his beautiful wife upstairs, all of it rested on a foundation that Amber now held in her hands. And he understood that. "Go," he whispered. It wasn't a command. Not even a request. It was a plea. "Please, leave my house. Now." Amber didn't hesitate. She rose, took Cody's hand. The boy, not understanding but sensing the icy rejection pouring off his uncle, obediently stood up. She didn't look back at Nathan. She simply led her son to the door, opened it, and stepped into the cold, empty hall. She didn't leave like a beggar. She left like someone who had just planted a mine and was calmly walking away to a safe distance. Before she pulled the heavy front door shut, she glanced up and saw Paige's silhouette frozen at the top of the stairs. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. In Paige's gaze there was no anger, only cold, analytical curiosity. The next 2 days turned into a nightmare. Patricia hadn't been bluffing. She didn't call again, didn't threaten, didn't offer money. She simply began methodically erasing Amber from the city's life. The first blow came at work. On Monday morning, just as Amber was trying to explain to Cody why they weren't going home but living in a bland motel room, her boss Walter called. Head of the architecture firm, the same man who had praised her project only a month ago and hinted at a bright future. Amber, hi. His voice was unnaturally cheerful yet distant, as if he were calling from another country. Here's the thing. Considering your complicated personal circumstances and, the potential reputational risks for the firm, we've discussed it and decided it'd be best if you took some time off. Time off? Amber repeated, her insides going cold. Yes, a leave. Indefinite. Unpaid, of course, he added quickly. Take a break, get things in order. Don't worry, we'll manage here somehow. It was a firing, soft, cowardly, wrapped in sticky corporate politeness. She knew exactly who had discussed it with her boss. She didn't even argue. Just said, I understand, and hung up. The second blow was quieter, but it cut deeper. She tried calling Susan, her only real friend since college. Susan had nothing to do with the Lions world. She worked as a doctor at a children's clinic. Amber just wanted to hear her voice, to ask for advice. The phone rang, but no one answered. Amber sent a message, Susan, I'm in serious trouble. Call me when you can. No reply. Not in an hour, not in 2, not by evening. The message was marked as read but left unanswered. Amber tried calling a couple of other acquaintances, wives of Keith's colleagues she sometimes went to cafes with. Same result. Either calls went unanswered or were declined. She was in a vacuum. Patricia wasn't just shutting doors, she was building invisible walls around her. The cash she grabbed from the house was vanishing fast. Living in a motel was expensive and unsafe. Amber started looking for an apartment, something simple, a one-bedroom on the outskirts. She found a few listings online. The first realtor, hearing her last name, eagerly promised he had the perfect option. But an hour later he called back, apologizing, saying the owners had changed their minds. The same thing happened with the second apartment. The third realtor simply stopped taking her calls. She understood. Her name had become a black mark. Nobody wanted to deal with the woman who dared to go against the Lions. Finally, on the fourth day, she got lucky. She spotted a handwritten ad taped to a pole. An old woman was renting out a one-bedroom apartment in a crumbling building at the far edge of the industrial district. The old lady didn't read society columns and had no idea who the Lions were. All she saw was a tired woman with a quiet boy and a stack of cash for first and last month's rent. The apartment was pitiful. The smell of age and dust clung to the air. Yellowed floral wallpaper peeling from the walls. A sagging couch that groaned with every shift. The window looked out on a gray courtyard with rusty swings and rows of garages. When Amber stepped inside for the first time, holding Cody's hand, a wave of despair hit her. This was rock bottom. After the spacious, sunlit house, after the perfect life she had hated but grown accustomed to, this dingy hole felt like a cruel joke. Cody shut down completely. He barely spoke. He sat on the creaking couch, clutching his teddy bear, staring at nothing. He refused to talk about his father, his grandmother, his birthday. That topic was forbidden. Amber tried to draw him out. She bought him new books, downloaded games to his tablet, but he stayed distant. Her heart clenched with pain and fear. She was saving him from lies, but at what cost? At the cost of his childhood? One evening, after Cody had fallen asleep, Amber sat in the kitchen staring into the dark window. A cup of cold tea sat untouched on the table. Her phone lay beside it, silent and useless. The money was running out. No job. No friends. She was utterly alone in that hostile silence. The walls of the tiny apartment pressed in on her, and for the first time in days she felt she might break, that Patricia had won. Not with threats, but with suffocating isolation. Then the phone vibrated on the table. Amber flinched. An unknown number. Her heart pounded. It could be debt collectors sent by Patricia. Or another well-wisher calling to remind her she was trash. She stared at the screen for a few seconds, fighting the urge to decline. But something made her answer. She swiped her finger and lifted the phone to her ear. "Hello," came a calm, slightly tired woman's voice. An older woman. No threat, no curiosity in her tone. "Am I speaking with Amber Lyons?" "Yes," Amber answered warily. "Who is this?" "My name is Rebecca Bowen," the woman said at last. "You probably don't know me. 9 years ago, I worked as head nurse at the private Vitamed clinic." Amber froze. Vitamed, the place, the hell, the salvation. She remembered the doctors' faces, but not the nurses. "I was there that day," Rebecca continued, as if sensing her hesitation. "I remember you. And I remember your mother-in-law, Patricia. She personally oversaw every step." Amber said nothing, her fingers gripping the phone tight. "I'm not calling out of idle curiosity," Rebecca's voice hardened. "A month after your procedure, I was fired. No reason given. Just staff cuts. But it was a lie. I tried to get work at other private clinics. I was rejected everywhere, even with 20 years of experience. Eventually I realized Patricia had put me on her blacklist. She made sure I couldn't find work, not just in this city but across the county." Rebecca took a breath. Her voice trembled, not with tears, but with cold, buried rage. "My mother was sick. She needed expensive medication, constant care. I was the only one who could provide it. While I was scrambling for work, chasing interviews in towns where no one knew me, we lost time. By the time I finally got a job as a regular nurse in a small hospital 100 miles away, it was already too late." She fell silent. And in that silence, Amber heard not just a story of unfair dismissal. She heard a story of personal tragedy. A wound that never healed. "That's why I'm calling, Amber," Rebecca finished, her voice calm again. "If you've decided to fight that woman, I want to help you. Not for some vague idea of justice, but because I have my own score to settle with Patricia Lyons." Amber sat in the darkness of her shabby kitchen, staring at her reflection in the black glass. The walls no longer closed in. Because just now, a door had appeared in one of them. Or rather, a breach. She was no longer alone. She had an ally. A witness who could confirm everything. And this ally's motivation was more powerful than any thirst for money. It was the hunger for revenge. They agreed to meet the next day. Not in the city, where half the people might recognize Amber, but in a small roadside cafe halfway to the town where Rebecca now lived and worked. The next day, Amber left Cody with the landlady, the elderly neighbor who had rented her the apartment, paying her a small sum to babysit for a few hours. Then she drove to the meeting. She was nervous. What if it was a trap? What if Patricia had sent this woman to lure her out, to get her to hand over the documents, or to record something that could be used against her? But when she walked into the half-empty cafe and saw a woman in her 60s sitting by the window, with tired eyes that were sharp and honest, all her doubts vanished. This was Rebecca. There was no lie, no pretense in her eyes. Only deeply buried pain and steady determination. They talked for more than an hour. Rebecca wasted no time on emotions. She spoke in facts. She remembered every detail, how nervous Amber had been, how Patricia had carried herself with authority, giving orders to the doctors as if they were her subordinates. How a young, handsome man had arrived for the procedure, introduced as a relative and donor. She remembered how Patricia personally collected every copy of the documents, ordering the staff in no uncertain terms to forget the visit had ever happened. She was scared, Rebecca said, stirring her cold coffee. Even back then, she was terrified the information would leak. That's why she got rid of me. I knew too much. I was the head nurse, every document went through me. She couldn't take that risk. Amber listened, realizing this woman's testimony was her strongest card. Papers could be dismissed as forgeries. But a living witness, a respected medical professional with an impeccable reputation whose career Patricia had destroyed, could not be ignored. When they parted, Rebecca laid her dry, strong hand over Amber's. Be careful. That woman will stop at nothing. If she believes you're truly dangerous, she'll go all the way. Amber's phone, silent for days, came alive again 2 days after that meeting. But it wasn't a call. It was an official notice, delivered by courier. A thin white envelope that felt as heavy as lead. Her hand shook as she tore it open in the doorway of her shabby apartment. Inside were court papers. Keith had filed for divorce. That didn't surprise her. She'd been expecting it. But what she read next made her sink to the floor in the hallway. He wasn't just divorcing her. He was demanding full custody of Cody. Her eyes darted over the legal jargon, each phrase hitting like a hammer: unstable emotional state of the mother, immoral behavior, public scandal instigated by the wife, extramarital affair, which she herself admitted. Patricia and her lawyers had done their work well. They'd built a case. Attached to the filing were witness statements. The same birthday guests who now claimed Amber had behaved erratically started the fight, while Keith was the innocent victim of deceit. There was also a report from a psychologist Keith had supposedly been seeing for months, citing his wife's strange and provocative behavior. Naturally, the doctor was from a clinic closely tied to the Lyons business. But the harshest blow was elsewhere. The petition claimed Amber had taken the child and disappeared, refusing the father access and causing Cody severe psychological trauma. Keith asked the court to immediately establish Cody's residence with him in a stable, healthy, familiar environment. And Amber? To be declared an unfit mother, her parental rights restricted. They didn't just want to divorce her. They wanted to take her son. To destroy her as a mother, a woman, a person. To grind her into dust. Amber sat on the floor, the envelope slipping from her hands. For a moment, panic swallowed her whole, real, icy, suffocating panic. They were right. She had nothing. No job, no money, no home, no reputation. And they had the best lawyers, money, connections, witnesses. Any court would side with them. She would lose. And she would lose Cody forever. She looked toward the room. Cody was sitting on the couch, drawing in his sketchbook. He was all she had left. Her only reason. The thought of those people taking him snapped her out of her fear. The panic drained away, replaced by cold, ringing fury. She knew what she had to do. There was one lawyer in town even Patricia feared. His name was Philip Harnas. Old, cynical, impossibly expensive. A divorce specialist who won hopeless cases. He didn't take everyone. He needed either big money or a sensational case. Amber had no money. But she had the latter. She sold the only thing of value left from her old life, platinum earrings with diamonds, Keith's gift when Cody was born. She had always hated them. They felt like shackles on her ears. The money was just enough for one consultation with Harnas. His office was in an old downtown building. No luxury, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk buried under papers, the smell of strong tobacco. Harnas himself was the opposite of the office, perfectly dressed, with sharp, piercing little eyes. He listened to her halting story in silence, glanced through the court papers the courier had delivered. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied her for a long moment. "They'll crush you," he said at last, without sympathy, like a doctor delivering a fatal diagnosis. "They hold all the cards. To the court, you're a hysterical adulteress who ran off with the child. He's the wronged husband, a respectable man, trying to save his son. It's a losing case." Amber's heart plummeted. "But I have evidence." "What? Papers from a clinic?" He smirked. "Their lawyers will call them forgeries, blackmail attempts." "A witness?" A nurse fired 10 years ago? They'll paint her as a bitter ex-employee out for revenge. All of that is circumstantial. And against you, they have hard evidence, witnesses, a psychologist's report, your disappearance. He paused, lit a cigarette. I won't take this case. Waste of time. Amber felt the ground vanish under her feet. This had been her last hope. But the truth is on my side. Harnaus blew out a stream of smoke, eyeing her like a child who didn't understand the world. There is no truth in court, Amber. There's only what you can prove. And you can't prove anything. He was about to stand, making it clear the conversation was over. But Amber didn't move. What if I can? She said quietly but firmly. What if I give you proof that can't be denied? He sat back down, studying her with sudden interest. And what would that be? Amber leaned forward. In their petition, they're asking the court to determine Cody's place of residence. And for that, the court first has to establish who his father is, doesn't it? That's right, Harnaus nodded, still not seeing where she was headed. So, Amber said slowly, enunciating each word, in our official response, we won't deny or argue anything. We'll just ask the court to include one document as part of preliminary evidence sharing between parties. She pulled a folded sheet of paper from her bag. It was a copy. The original was locked in a bank deposit box she'd managed to rent with her last bit of money. She handed it to the lawyer. Harnaus unfolded the page. His little eyes widened as he read. It was the Vitam Clinic report. With names, with dates. But he wasn't staring at Patricia's signature. His eyes were fixed on another line. Biological material provided by Lyons, Nathan. Harnaus looked up at Amber. His cynical smirk was gone, replaced by the gleam of a predator who had just spotted prey. Suddenly, he didn't see a hopeless case. He saw the biggest bomb ever dropped in that city's courtroom. So that's it, he muttered, staring at the paper. Not just adultery. Adultery with his own brother. It's not adultery, Amber corrected. It's a conspiracy. Harnaus leaned back and burst out laughing, loud and genuine. My girl, you're a genius. They file for divorce to destroy you, and you turn their family court into a gladiator match between two brothers. This won't be a trial. It'll be a bloodbath. He looked at the paper again, then at her. I'll take your case. And I won't charge you, yet. Because there's no way I'm missing this show. He stood, full of energy. Tomorrow morning, this little paper lands on the judge's desk. And a copy goes straight to your husband's lawyer. Then the real fun begins. Amber walked out of his office into the street. She no longer felt like a victim. She felt like a general who had just given the order to launch the decisive battle. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was on the attack, using their own weapon, the law. She had dragged their dirty secret from the shadows of bedrooms and boardrooms into the light of official court records. It wasn't gossip now. It was a legal fact. And it was about to blow the Lyons family apart from the inside. The next day, Harnaus called her with a short update, documents delivered. Now we wait. She didn't need to see it. She could imagine it, the polished lawyer in Keith's fancy office opening the package from Harnaus. How his smug face would collapse as he read the brief cover letter and saw the clinic report. How he would stammer through a phone call to his client, trying to explain that their flawless case, rescuing a child from an unstable mother, had just turned into a sordid family scandal involving his own brother. But even she couldn't have imagined the scale of destruction. The first shockwaves reached her 2 days later. On the evening news, tucked between a story about a charity auction and a theater premiere, came a short gossip segment. The smiling anchor reported that one of the city's most admired couples, businessman Nathan Lyons and his wife Paige, were rumored to be going through a rough patch. Vague hints about irreconcilable differences followed, and then the bombshell that Paige had left their mansion with their 2 children and moved into her own downtown apartment. Rumors, Amber smirked. No, it wasn't a rumor. It was the first public consequence of her strike. Paige hadn't waited for explanations. When she saw the official document with her husband's name tied to his brother's child, she didn't scream or throw dishes. She simply packed her things, took her children, and left. That was her style: cold, precise, merciless. Public humiliation was worse for Nathan than any fight at home. His perfect facade, model husband, successful businessman, cracked in front of the entire city. Nathan's reaction came quickly. That same night, Harnas called Amber. His voice brimmed with excitement, barely suppressing laughter. "Well, congratulations," he said. "Looks like there's a fire in enemy territory. Nathan's lawyer just called me." Not Keith's, Nathan's. He tried to figure out what's going on, threatened a defamation suit. I politely suggested he order a DNA test before waving lawsuits around. I think he got the message. But the real explosion went off inside the family. Amber learned about it later, piecing together fragments of gossip and whispers. Nathan, whose life had collapsed overnight, his wife gone, his children against him, business partners asking pointed questions, rushed to the family home. Not his glass palace, but the old Lyons estate, where Patricia ruled everything. He stormed in like a fury. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the golden boy, his mother's pride. He was a humiliated, raging man demanding answers from the one who had dragged him into this mess. He burst into his mother's study, where Patricia sat behind her massive oak desk like a queen on her throne. "What have you done?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. "You destroyed my life. My family. Because of your damn plan. Because of your obsession with heirs." Patricia, they said, sat in silence. Her face was as unreadable as stone. She let him rage, let him pour out every drop of fury and despair. She allowed him to blame her for every sin. And when he was spent, chest heaving, she lifted her cold eyes and struck back. At that moment Keith walked in. Patricia had clearly summoned him. He looked pale, bewildered, deceived. His eyes darted between his enraged brother and his inscrutable mother, trying to piece it together. And then Patricia began her performance. She rose slowly from her chair. She was no longer a statue of stone, she was a suffering mother, her heart torn apart. "How can you accuse me, Nathan?" Her voice trembled with grief. "Did I force you? Did I hold a gun to your head?" She turned to Keith, her eyes glistening with tears. "Keith, my son. I wanted to tell you, but differently. Not like this. I wanted what was best." She paused, letting her words sink in. Both sons hung on her every syllable. "It was Nathan's idea," she said, her voice ringing with sincerity. "Entirely. 9 years ago, when we learned of your problem, Keith, Nathan came to me. He said he couldn't bear to see his brother suffer. He said he wanted to help. He offered it as a noble sacrifice. To keep our family whole. To give you a son, an heir. To keep the Lyons line alive." The lie was monstrous. Perfect in its monstrosity. It didn't just clear her of blame, it turned the entire story inside out. Nathan was no longer the puppet, he was the mastermind. And she wasn't the schemer, just a mother who couldn't say no to one son trying to save the other. Nathan froze. He stared at his mother, disbelief etched across his face. The woman who had worshipped him all his life, who held him up as her shining example, had just stabbed him in the back with chilling calm. Betrayed him. In front of the brother he had despised his entire life. "What?" he whispered. "Mom, what are you saying? That's not true." Keith's eyes burned into him. The confusion was gone. Hatred flickered there now. A lifetime of resentment, insecurity, jealousy of his younger brother, all of it found its release. He believed. He wanted to believe. This version explained everything: his infertility, his humiliation, his brother's sudden noble sacrifice. It revealed not kindness, but a cunning theft of everything Keith thought was his, even the right to a son. "So that's it," Keith hissed, stepping toward Nathan. "A sacrifice? You thought you'd help me, little brother?" "I know, she's lying," Nathan shouted, desperately seeking his mother's eyes. but hers were cold. She had already passed sentence. Patricia looked at her sons, now ready to tear each other apart. She had sacrificed her golden boy to save the game. She hadn't just cleared herself, she had redirected their fury at one another, poisoning them with a lie that would make brotherhood impossible forever. She ripped her own family apart to keep her grip on power, and in that moment, she was truly terrifying. She wasn't just defending herself, she reveled in her ability to shape reality as she pleased. Even if that reality was built on the ruins of her children's lives. A day after Patricia set her sons against each other, she called Amber. Her voice was calm, businesslike, as though nothing had happened. No apologies, no threats, just an order. Amber, you need to come. Tonight, 7 o'clock. To our house. We have to discuss everything. Together. And bring Cody. He has to be here too. Amber wanted to refuse. She didn't want to see any of them. Least of all take Cody there. But something in Patricia's tone, a new, hidden note, made her pause. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. And Amber understood Patricia wouldn't leave her alone until she got what she wanted. Harnaus had advised her to go. Go, he said over the phone. Listen. Remember. Every word, every threat is ammunition for us now. Just don't sign anything. Cody didn't want to go. I don't want to see Uncle Keith, he said softly. He's not an uncle anymore, he's a father, Amber wanted to say, but she bit her tongue. We won't stay long, sweetheart. Just to talk, then we'll leave. I'll be with you the whole time, she promised, the only thing she could guarantee. They pulled up to the Grand Lion's house right at 7. Once, it had symbolized prestige and stability for Amber. Now it looked ominous and hostile. Every window glared down at her like an enemy's eye. She took Cody's hand. His palm was cold and damp. The door was opened by the housekeeper, an older woman who had worked for the Lyons family even before Amber's marriage. She looked at Amber with undisguised pity and, without a word, led them into the living room. The very same living room where Amber's life had collapsed less than 2 weeks ago. Now it was spotless. No trace of shattered glass or birthday cake. Only a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. Everyone was there. Patricia sat in her favorite chair by the fireplace, ramrod straight. Keith stood at the window, his back to the room. And on the sofa, pressed into the corner, sat Nathan. He looked awful, rumpled, dark circles under his eyes, all his polished charm gone. He didn't even glance at Amber when she entered. Cody instinctively hid behind her, peeking out from her back. I'm glad you came, Patricia said, breaking the silence. Now that everyone's here, we can finally decide how we're going to live from now on. Amber didn't get the chance to answer. Keith spun away from the window. His face was twisted with rage. Decide? What's there to decide? He hissed, his eyes fixed not on Amber but on his brother. It's already decided. By this so-called savior. Nathan flinched but stayed silent, staring at the floor. Keith, don't start, Patricia snapped. We're not here to point fingers. Not here to point fingers? Keith laughed, a hollow, joyless laugh. Then what? To listen to how this Judas helped me? How he slept with my wife behind my back to bless me with a child. It wasn't her fault. Nathan suddenly shouted, leaping to his feet. His first words of the night. Amber had nothing to do with it. It was an order. Whose order? Keith sneered. Yours? From your noble little heart? It was Mother's order. Nathan cried desperately, pointing at Patricia. She arranged it. She forced me. She forced both of us. Patricia didn't even blink. Don't you dare dump your guilt on me, she said icily. You came to me with that idea. You begged me to make it happen. And that was it. Keith, who had been holding himself together by a thread, snapped. With an animal roar, he lunged at his brother. He didn't throw a punch, he tackled him like a beast, trying to drag him to the ground. You bastard! Thief! You stole everything from me. Caught off guard, Nathan tried to fight him off. They grappled in the middle of the living room, rolling across the expensive Persian rug, overturning the coffee table. Glass shattered. It wasn't a fight between men, it was a brawl between two animals, snarling, gasping, spitting not just blows but years of accusations. You always hated me. Keith rasped, trying to choke him. Always jealous. You even stole my son. I didn't steal him. Nathan shouted, shoving back. I saved your pathetic life. You're a barren failure. Mother always knew it. Amber froze in horror. She grabbed Cody, tried to cover his ears, pulling him toward the door. Patricia stood, her face white with fury. Stop. This instant. In my house. But they didn't hear her. They were trapped in their own hell of hatred and grudges that had been festering for years. A lifetime of rivalry, every lie their family was built on, erupted in this filthy, desperate struggle. Amber backed toward the door, dragging Cody, who was stiff with shock. And then, in the chaos, just as Keith raised his fist again, Amber sensed something had shifted in the room. Silence. Not complete, but a different kind of silence. She turned. Cody was no longer clutching her hand. He stood alone in the doorway. He had pulled free and just stood there, watching. His face was unnervingly calm, like porcelain. No fear. No tears. Just a blank, pale mask. He was watching two grown men, his father and his uncle, rolling on the floor like rabid animals. He was watching his grandmother, who was screaming, not out of care, but out of fury at the disorder. The fight sputtered out as suddenly as it had begun. Exhausted, the brothers lay sprawled on the rug, panting. Keith's lip was bleeding, Nathan was clutching his shoulder. The only sound was their ragged breathing. And then, in that charged silence, Cody's clear, steady voice cut through. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shouting. He just asked a question. He didn't look at the men fighting. He looked straight at his mother. In his eyes, once blank, there was now something terrifyingly adult, awareness. Mom, he said, his words sharp and unmistakable. Which one of them is the monster? The question was worse than the fight. Worse than the screaming and the accusations. It showed that something far greater than family ties had just broken. A child's soul. He no longer saw a father, an uncle, a grandmother. He saw monsters. And he was only trying to figure out which was the worst. In that moment, Amber realized her war for truth had carved a wound in her son that might never heal. She felt like she couldn't breathe. She stepped toward Cody, reaching for him, but he pulled back. She didn't say a word to Keith, Nathan, or Patricia. She just placed her hand on her son's shoulder, turned him around, and led him out of the house. No one tried to stop them. She buckled him into the car seat. He didn't resist, didn't cry. He was like a doll. All the way back to their shabby apartment, he stayed silent. Amber tried to talk, some soothing, rambling nonsense about how everything would be fine, how Mommy was here. He didn't answer. He just stared out the window at the blur of city lights. When they got home, he walked straight into the room without a word, sat on the couch, and clutched his teddy bear. From that day on, he stopped speaking. Completely. At first Amber thought it was shock, that it would pass. She tried to be patient. She made his favorite pancakes, read books aloud, played cartoons. He ate, listened, watched. But not a single word left his lips. He moved around the apartment like a shadow. He got up, washed, dressed, ate. Then he sat at the table and drew. His drawings changed. He used to sketch cars, superheroes, dinosaurs. Now all that came from his pencil were black, furious scribbles, tangled into a tight, chaotic mess. As if all the pain and terror he couldn't speak poured out onto paper. A week passed. The silence in their apartment became a physical thing. It pressed down, suffocated. Amber spoke out loud just to break it. She spoke to Cody, knowing there would be no reply. At night, when he finally fell asleep, she sat by his bed and cried, quietly, soundlessly, so he wouldn't wake. She felt like she was losing him. He was right there, but gone. Stolen. Not physically, but inside. The Lyons family hadn't just taken her husband, her home, her work. They were taking her son, his soul. When it was time to return to school, panic clawed at her. She couldn't send him like this. But keeping him home would give child services another excuse to step in. She dressed him, walked him to class. He went in without looking back. Midday, her phone rang, an unknown number. Amber Lyons? Hello, this is Rita Plummer, the school principal. Could you come in, please? The voice was stern, official. Amber's heart plummeted. She dropped everything and was in the principal's office within half an hour. Rita Plummer, a stout woman in a sharp suit, sat behind her desk. Beside her stood Cody, eyes on the floor. He didn't look at Amber. What happened? Amber asked, her voice trembling. Cody got into a fight, Rita said flatly. At recess. With a boy from another class. Amber turned to her son. Not a scratch on him. Was he badly hurt? Cody wasn't hurt, Rita answered briskly. The other boy was. He's got a bad bite on his arm and deep scratches on his face. We had to call the nurse. Amber was stunned. Cody had never been a fighter. He was quiet, gentle. But how? Why? According to the other children, Rita paused, choosing her words. The boy said something about your family. Something he must have heard from his parents. About your husband leaving you. Cody didn't say a word. He just lunged at him. It took 2 kids to pull him off. Rita sighed heavily, fixing her eyes on Amber. Amber, I understand. Family troubles, divorce, it's hard. But your son's behavior, it's deeply concerning. This aggression, his complete silence, these are signs of serious psychological trauma. She paused, then delivered the blow. You realize, by law, as a school we're obligated to report signs of an unstable home environment to Child Protective Services? Child Services. The word detonated in Amber's head. That was the endgame. That was the lever Patricia would use to finish her. Now it wasn't just about who Cody would live with. It was about him being taken away from both of them. Taken into foster care while the case dragged on. They'd prove she was unstable, unemployed, and capable of handling her own child, that she had driven him into breakdown. The fear that gripped her was different this time. Cold, sharp, absolutely clear. She took Cody home, and all the way back her mind pounded with one thought: defense was no longer an option. The defensive game was lost. While she waited for court, while her lawyer shuffled papers, they'd take her son. They had her cornered. And a cornered animal doesn't defend anymore. It attacks. Back at the apartment, she set Cody up with his drawings. Then she sat at the table. There were no tears left, no despair. Only ice-cold, razor-sharp resolve. She realized she'd been fighting on the wrong battlefield all along. Trying to prove she was right, defend her honor. What a fool. In Patricia's world, there was no honor, no truth. Only power. And to win, she had to strike at the source of that power. She picked up her phone. Found the number. Patricia. Her fingers didn't shake. She took a deep breath and pressed call. Patricia answered almost immediately. I'm listening. Patricia, it's Amber. I'm calling to tell you, the rules of the game just changed. Amber's voice was flat and cold as steel. No pleading, no anger. Just fact. On the other end of the line, silence stretched. What do you mean? I was called into school today, Amber continued. Because of a fight Cody got into. The school plans to notify child services. Do you understand what that means? It means the war you started is now threatening my son directly. And I won't allow that. And what exactly are you going to do? Patricia's tone dripped with mockery. I'm going to end this war. Right now, Amber said. Those clinic documents, I used to think they only concerned the family's reputation. I was wrong. I showed them to someone I know, a financial consultant. She paused, imagining Patricia stiffen on the other end. He said that if it ever became public knowledge that the heir to a construction empire was born out of a secret scheme orchestrated by its own head, that's not just scandal. In business terms, it's called severe reputational risk. That's the kind of thing that makes banks review credit lines. That makes major contractors hit pause on multi-million-dollar projects. That can tank a company's stock if it's public. The silence on the line deepened. Imagine, Patricia, what happens when your main lender or a key contractor on that new development project receives an anonymous copy of those documents. Just for reference. Amber spoke slowly, lacing venom into every word. They won't care who's guilty or innocent. They'll just want to protect their money. She took a breath and struck the final blow. So this isn't about clearing my name anymore. Or about who Cody lives with. This is about whether your construction empire, the one you've spent your whole life building, survives at all. The choice is yours. You have 24 hours to stop the custody case and end all pressure on me. Or those documents will start a life of their own. And I won't be able to stop them. Without waiting for a reply, Amber hung up. She had crossed the Rubicon. This was no longer defense. It was blackmail. And she had aimed her weapon straight at her mother-in-law's heart, her business. She waited. Waited for Patricia to call. Waited for Harnas to call. Waited for some sign. But the phone stayed silent. The next morning she dropped silent Cody at school, then returned to the apartment and glued herself to her tablet, refreshing local news sites. She searched for proof her threat had worked. And she found it. By noon, a short piece appeared on the city's main business portal. The headline was neutral: major municipal contract for new housing development may be reconsidered. But in the text, buried among cautious phrases about the need to recheck the contractor's financial stability, was one name: Lyons Construction. An anonymous City Hall source hinted at instability within the company's leadership that could impact project deadlines. That was it. Her shot had landed. The rumors she'd launched as a threat were already rippling outward, reaching real deals. Some partner or official, spooked by potential scandal, had decided to cover themselves. Patricia's empire, once untouchable, had its first crack. Amber felt a rush of dark satisfaction. But the 24 hours passed, and Patricia never called. The silence was terrifying. Had she decided she could handle it? Had she brushed off the ultimatum, planning to bury it the way she buried everything else? Doubt began gnawing at Amber again. For 2 days she lived on edge. She picked up Cody from school, made dinner, did homework with him, all on autopilot. Her thoughts were elsewhere, replaying her conversation with Patricia again and again. Maybe she'd pushed too far. Maybe she had underestimated her mother-in-law. Then, on the third evening, after Cody was asleep and Amber was washing dishes, the phone rang. Rebecca Bowen. Amber wiped her hands and grabbed it, her heart pounding with dread. Amber, it's Rebecca. The nurse's voice was tight but steady. She found me. The words made Amber's blood run cold. Patricia? Yes, Rebecca confirmed. Right at work. She showed up at our small-town hospital in her black car with a driver. Can you imagine the nerve? Walked straight into the staff room like she owned the place. Asked me to step outside. Rebecca drew in a breath. She didn't threaten. She didn't yell. She talked like she was making me the most generous offer of my life. She knows I know about your documents. And she offered me money. How much? Amber whispered. $500,000, Rebecca said. She said she could bring it in cash as soon as tomorrow. $500,000 for me to sign one paper. What paper? An official statement for court. An affidavit, she called it. Saying I lied about everything. That I don't remember the events from 9 years ago, and if I do, they happened completely differently. That you pressured me, promised me a reward for the right testimony. She wanted me to sign that I'm the liar and you're the blackmailer. Amber stayed quiet, listening. Patricia was playing true to form. Can't destroy the evidence? Destroy the witness. Not physically, morally. By her conscience, her past, her truth. $500,000 to Rebecca, living on a modest salary in a small-town hospital, was a lifetime. A new apartment. A secure old age. Everything Patricia had taken from her. What did you tell her? Amber asked, though she already knew. Rebecca gave a bitter, sharp laugh through the phone. I told her she doesn't have enough money to buy back the years of life my mother lost. And then I politely suggested she leave before I called security. She looked at me like I was insane. She honestly couldn't understand how anyone could turn down that kind of money. Patricia left. But she left behind a poisonous trail. She had shown she wouldn't stop. She would press, probe for weaknesses, try to buy, to intimidate. Thank you for calling, Rebecca. Thank you for not giving in, Amber said sincerely. I told you, I've got my own score to settle with her, the nurse replied firmly. Amber hung up and sat at the table. She didn't feel fear. Or panic. She felt a cold fire of triumph ignite inside her. Because in trying to plug one leak, Patricia had just blown a much bigger hole in her own ship. She had done exactly what Amber and her lawyer had been waiting for. Amber remembered her first conversation with Harnas after meeting Rebecca. People like the Lyons always do the same thing, the cynical lawyer had said, rubbing his hands together. Once they realize the nurse is on your side, they'll try to buy her. It's instinct. And we need to be ready. On his advice, Amber met with Rebecca again. But this time, not in a roadside cafe. In a nondescript downtown office. And they weren't alone. A notary, arranged by Harnas, sat with them. A young man had a professional camera on a tripod. Rebecca sat at the table, facing the lens. The notary asked questions, and she answered calmly, looking straight into the camera. She told everything, from beginning to end. The day Patricia arrived at the clinic with a frightened young Amber. The donor, Nathan, the younger son. The secrecy. Patricia's direct orders to erase all records. Rebecca's sudden dismissal. Her name blacklisted across the region. Her sick mother, who never got the care she needed. This wasn't just a taped conversation. It was an official, notarized witness statement. Every word documented. The video sealed in an envelope under the notary's hand. And now, after Patricia's hospital visit, the testimony carried a whole new weight. Attempting to bribe a key witness right after they'd given sworn testimony wasn't just dirty play. It was a crime. Obstruction of justice. Patricia thought she was buying silence. But really, she was walking straight into the trap Amber had set. She had signed her own confession of guilt, panic, and criminal methods. Amber picked up her phone and called Harnas. "Philip, I've got news," she said. The fish took the bait. After the call, she felt the noose around Patricia's neck tighten one more knot. Harnas was thrilled, going on about witness tampering, obstruction, how they now had grounds to go to the prosecutor. But Amber barely listened. Victory tasted bitter. Cody was still silent. Every day she took him to school like sending him into battle, then picked him up praying there wouldn't be another call from the principal. Her small tactical wins against Patricia weren't helping her son. He still sat in the evenings hunched over his furious black scribbles. She'd almost stopped checking the news about the Lyons. She knew a silent, brutal civil war was raging inside that family. Harnas kept her updated. The divorce and custody trial was frozen. Keith's lawyer had asked for time to clarify claims in light of new circumstances. Legal jargon for complete confusion. They didn't know what to do. Any move now was dangerous. There was no word from Keith. Amber imagined what he must be feeling. His world built on lies had collapsed. The man he thought was his father wasn't. The brother he envied was a traitor. The mother he obeyed was a monster. He was crushed, humiliated. Worst of all, alone. Nathan refused to speak to him. Patricia had made him the scapegoat. Amber barely thought about him. He belonged to her past, just another piece on Patricia's chessboard. Then one late night, just as she was about to go to bed, her phone lit up. Unknown number. Amber stiffened. Usually calls like that came from the enemy camp. She braced herself for another round of filth or threats. Hello, Amber? The voice was quiet, hoarse, almost unrecognizable. It's Keith. She froze. She hadn't heard his voice since the day he'd called from his mother's house, begging her to come back. Then he'd been panicked, frantic. Now he sounded only exhausted, completely, hopelessly drained. What do you want, Keith? She asked coldly. I need to talk to you, he stumbled. Not on the phone. In person. Can we? There's nothing to talk about. All issues go through my lawyer. Please. For the first time, she heard something in his voice she had never heard before. Not command. Not demand. A real human plea. It's not about the divorce. It's about everything else. I'll come wherever you say. Alone. Something in his tone made her agree. Not curiosity, more like a gut feeling that it mattered. Half an hour. The square by the Victory Cinema. I'll be on the bench near the fountain. She chose that spot on purpose. Busy, well lit. She didn't trust him. Not now. Not with the state he was in. She arrived a little early and sat on the bench in the center of the square, where she could watch the main walkway. He showed up exactly 30 minutes later. Amber barely recognized him. He was thinner, hollow-cheeked. The expensive coat hung on him like it belonged to someone else. He hadn't shaved, his hair was a mess. He no longer looked like the polished son of a business matriarch. He looked like a vagrant. He walked past her without noticing, dropped onto a bench under the lamppost, and buried his head in his hands. Amber watched for a few minutes. He wasn't acting. He was broken. She got up and went to him. Keith. He flinched, lifted his head. In the lamplight, his eyes looked empty. Amber. Thank you for coming. They sat in silence for several minutes. He stared into the dark. She stared at him. I know everything, he finally said, still not looking at her. About Nathan. About my mother. About the clinic. She told me her version, of course. Where she's the saint and everyone else is the traitor. He gave a bitter laugh. You know what's funny? I almost believed her. I wanted so badly to believe Nathan was to blame. That he schemed it all to humiliate me. That was easier than admitting my mother had been lying to me my whole life. From the start. He turned toward her. His eyes brimmed with tears. I really couldn't have kids, Amber. She told me herself. Long before the wedding. Said it would be our little secret. That we'd find a way. And then she just used me. Used you. Used him. We were all pawns in her game. He broke off, swallowing hard. I'm nothing now, Amber. My mother threw me out of the company. Froze my accounts. Nathan hates me, and I hate him. I'm back in my old city apartment, alone. And I drink. Every day. Because if I don't, I start thinking. And that's unbearable. Amber listened to this confession without gloating, without pity. Only cold emptiness. The man who had tried to take her son was now another casualty of the same system that had almost destroyed her. Why are you telling me this, Keith? She asked. He looked her straight in the eye. And she saw something new there. Not malice. Not blame. A desperate kind of clarity. Because you're the only one who understands, he said quietly. You were her pawn too. You saw the real her. And you're the only one who dared fight back. He leaned closer, his voice tightening to a near whisper. I didn't call to beg forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I called to make a deal. A deal? An alliance, he corrected. I want to help you. I want to destroy her. Not for revenge. For he hesitated, searching for the word. For a chance. A chance to make something right. Amber studied him, wondering if this was another trap. And what do you have to offer me? Everything, he breathed. I'll withdraw the custody suit. I'll testify in court. I'll tell everything I know. Her manipulations, her lies, how she turned me against you. I'll hand over everything I've got on her. And I do have something. He rushed the words out, afraid she'd stop him. And in return, I only ask one thing. Help me not to come back to you. Not to be a family again. Just help me earn the right to be in Cody's life. Not as his father, I lost that right. As Uncle Keith. Just Uncle Keith, who will love him and do whatever it takes to protect him from this family. He looked at her with such desperate hope that Amber felt her breath catch. She didn't see a manipulator or an enemy. She saw a broken man who had lost everything, clinging to the last scrap of redemption. She realized this wasn't a trap. It was surrender. Total, unconditional. Her main opponent in this war, the face of her humiliation and fear, had just crossed over to her side. And he was bringing a weapon powerful enough to end it. Amber looked at Keith sitting on that bench under the weak lamplight. He looked like a beaten dog searching for an owner. But in his eyes, alongside the despair, there was something else, resolve. The desperate resolve of a man with nothing left to lose. I'll think about it, she said. It was all she could manage. She couldn't give him an answer yet. Not after everything he had done. She stood and walked away without looking back. All the way home, she replayed his words in her head. An alliance with Keith. It sounded unthinkable. Betray her, humiliate her, try to steal her son, and then come asking for an alliance. But she knew he wasn't lying. He'd been broken by the same woman who had tried to break her. That made them enemies of the same enemy. And that, as the saying goes, is the strongest foundation for an alliance. The next day she called Harnas and repeated the whole conversation. The lawyer stayed quiet, listening. Amber expected him to laugh, or call it a setup. Instead, he took it surprisingly seriously. Don't be too quick to turn him down, he said after a long pause. This could be our ace. An insider. He knows all their weak spots. But don't rush to trust him either. Tell him you'll hear him out, but only with me present. Then we'll see what he's really bringing. Amber passed along Harnas's words to Keith. He didn't hesitate. He agreed. The meeting was set for 2 days later, in Harnas's office, but it never happened. Patricia struck first. She had eyes and ears everywhere. The old housekeeper, who had served the Lyons family for decades and was blindly loyal to her mistress, must have told Patricia about Keith's late-night call to Amber. For Patricia, that was the last straw. Her eldest son, her weak, unloved pillar, had dared to conspire with the family's sworn enemy. To her, it was treason. And she responded with her trademark cruelty and efficiency. The very next day, Patricia called an emergency board meeting of Lyons Construction. There, she announced Keith's immediate removal from the board and his dismissal as deputy CEO for actions damaging to the company's reputation. It was a public execution. And she didn't stop there. That same day, her lawyers sent notices to every bank where Keith held accounts. By her order, as head of the family trust, all his personal and corporate accounts were frozen. By lunchtime, he couldn't pay for a cup of coffee. His credit cards were just useless plastic. She cut him off from money. Completely. That evening, when Keith tried to storm the family mansion to demand answers, security refused to let him through the gates. They told him Patricia didn't wish to see him. She erased him. Not just from business, but from family. She made him nothing. That move, meant to frighten Keith into crawling back on his knees, had the opposite effect. It was the last nail in the coffin of his fear of her. Patricia thought stripping him of money and status would take away his strength. But she was wrong. By taking everything, she made him free. And dangerous. That evening, Keith called Amber again. His voice was different now. No fatigue, no pleading. Just a cold, steady rage. She knows everything, he said flatly. She threw me out. From the company, from the family. Froze every account. I'm officially broke. Keith, I'm sore, Amber began. Don't, he cut her off. Don't pity me. She thought she'd scare me. But she freed me. I've got nothing left to lose, Amber. Nothing at all. He paused. I'm coming over. Right now. With what I promised. An hour later, he was at her building. He came up to her shabby apartment, glanced around without disgust or surprise, and simply nodded, as if this was exactly where he belonged. In his hands was an old, worn leather briefcase. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Amber had spent so many sleepless nights, and opened it. He pulled out several thick, hard-bound notebooks. What's this? Amber asked. My journals, he said. I've kept them all my life. Since I was a teenager. Dumb habit. I wrote down everything. He laid them on the table. This one, he tapped a finger on one of them, is from that year. 9 years ago. When I found out about my problem. I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. And I wrote it all down. Every conversation with my mother. Every word she said. His fingers turned the pages, covered in tight, frantic handwriting. Here, look. He stopped at a page. June. Mother said there was a solution. Some private method. Told me not to worry about the details. Just to trust her. That she'd arrange everything. Said it was for the family. And here, a week later. Another talk with her. She insisted. Said it was my only chance to be a father, and her only chance to have a grandchild. Strange. She got obsessive about it. He lifted his eyes to Amber. It's all here. Every word. All her manipulation. How she step by step convinced me it was normal. Right. Necessary. She didn't threaten me, she was subtler. She pressed on my guilt, my shame, my hunger to feel normal. Amber stared at the filled pages, her breath caught in her chest. This wasn't just testimony. This was a crime log. A chronicle of psychological abuse, documented day by the victim himself. The clinic documents proved the act. Rebecca's testimony proved the conspiracy. But these journals, they proved intent. They revealed the machinery Patricia had built to get what she wanted. In her fury to punish her disobedient son, Patricia had made a fatal mistake. She thought cutting him off would neutralize him. Instead, she unchained him, turning him from a broken victim into a fearless accuser. She had handed him the deadliest weapon against her, his own written pain. Amber looked at the stack of journals on the kitchen table. It was a map of the minefield Patricia had built her empire on. A map drawn by her own son's hand. Keith sat across from her, gaunt but with a new, sharp determination in his eyes. He had made his move. Now it was her turn. All right, she said. I accept your offer. But on my terms. I'll agree to anything, he answered without hesitation. First, you officially, through your lawyer, withdraw the custody suit and accept all my conditions for the divorce. Second, you hand these journals to my lawyer and sign an affidavit confirming everything in them. He nodded. I'll do it. And your condition? About Cody? Amber looked at him. In that moment, she didn't see the man who had humiliated her, she saw a father who had lost his son. If you do everything you've promised, she said slowly, I won't stand in the way of you seeing Cody. But not now. Right now he needs peace. When this is all over, we'll talk about it again. But the choice will be his. Only his. Keith lowered his head. I understand, he said quietly. Thank you. The next day, Amber and Keith walked into Harnaus's office together. The lawyer raised his eyebrows but said nothing. There was a gleam of excitement in his eyes. He listened in silence as Keith spoke, leafed through the journals, then fired off a few sharp questions to test his resolve. Keith answered honestly, without excuses. He was ready. "Well then, Patricia," Harnaus muttered, closing the last notebook. "Looks like you've lost." The case wasn't just winnable anymore. It was airtight. They had everything: medical records, a witness statement, proof of a bribery attempt, and now the full confession of a key player, backed up by his own journals. Patricia was cornered. But Harnaus wasn't rushing. "Throwing this straight into court would be like shooting sparrows with a cannon," he said, pacing the room. "Yes, we'd win custody. That's obvious. But she'd spin it. Put on a show, claim she acted out of a mother's love, out of desperation. And she'd survive. We don't just need a win. We need to sink her." He stopped in front of Amber. "Keith, you were deputy CEO. Did you have access to company financials?" Keith nodded. "To operational ones, yes. But not everything. My mother always kept the strategic finances under her personal control. The CFO only answered to her." "That's enough," said Harnaus. "We need to find her Achilles heel. And for people like your mother, it's always the same: money." On his advice, they hired one of the city's best forensic auditors. His name was Oscar Marcus, a quiet man in glasses who looked more like a math teacher than a financial bloodhound. Amber paid him with the last of the money from selling her earrings. A few days later they met again in Harnaus's office: Amber, Keith, the lawyer, and Oscar. Keith brought his laptop and several folders of documents he had managed to copy before losing access. Annual reports, balance sheets, cash flow statements. Oscar put on his glasses and went to work in silence. File after file, number after number, scribbling in his notebook. The others sat watching, the room heavy with quiet. An hour passed. Then another. Nothing. "It's clean," Keith said finally, breaking the silence. "As far as I know, she always paid her taxes. The company was spotless. She prided herself on that." Oscar didn't answer. He zoomed in on one report and stared at a single line. "Consulting services," he read aloud. "Large, regular payments. Every quarter. To 3 different companies. Vega Consult, Horizon Project, Alpha Strategy. Ring any bells, Keith?" Keith frowned. "Not really. My mother said they were contractors. Analysts doing market reviews for her." "Very expensive analysts," Oscar murmured. $500,000 a year each. For what? Where are their reports? Where's the work product?" "I don't know," Keith admitted. "I never saw any." Oscar's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up databases, cross-checking accounts. "Interesting," he said after a while. "All 3 companies are registered at the same business address. A small office park on the city's edge. And all 3 list the same owner. A Patricia Berry." "Berry?" Keith repeated. "Never heard of her." "I think I have," Amber said quietly. Everyone turned to her. "Patricia Berry, that's Patricia Lyons' maiden name." The room went still. Harnaus and Keith stared at her in shock. Oscar removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "So that's it," he said. "An old trick. Classic fund siphoning. Create shell companies under fake or hidden owners, sign bogus contracts for services that don't exist. Funnel money out of the main company into them. And from there," he slid his glasses back on and typed faster, "from there, most likely, it's moved again. Offshore accounts, somewhere quiet." Keith sat pale and frozen, staring at nothing. "I can't believe it," he whispered. She was stealing from her own family? From her own company?" "She wasn't stealing from the family," Harnaus corrected him, voice calm but edged with steel. "She was stealing from you. And from your brother. She wasn't just building an empire, she was building herself a golden parachute." Money no one knew about. Money that belonged only to her. Amber listened, her mind reeling. What had started as a war over pride, humiliation, and custody of her son had suddenly taken on an entirely different scale. The secret of Cody's birth was only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lay something far darker and dirtier. Not just a family scandal, but cold, calculated financial crime. Patricia hadn't been fighting for family honor or for preserving the bloodline. She was fighting to protect her cash cow, her secret empire built on lies and theft. Can we prove it? Amber asked, looking at the auditor. Oscar nodded. With Keith's insider help, yes. We can trace the entire chain. From Lyons Construction all the way to an account in Cyprus or the Caymans. It'll take time. But we'll get there. Amber glanced at Harnas. She saw the same realization in his eyes as in hers. They now held not just proof of immoral behavior, but evidence of a crime. Large-scale fraud. Embezzlement. That changed everything. Now she had the power not just to humiliate Patricia, not just to win custody. She had the power to send her to prison. For a long time. The weapon in her hands was terrifying in its finality. The temptation to use it was almost unbearable. In the weeks that followed, Amber's team worked like a machine. Harnas commanded with the zeal of a general preparing for battle. Oscar, quiet and methodical, kept digging. With Keith recalling passwords and file names from memory, he broke through layer after layer of obfuscation. He unraveled the tangle of fake contracts and offshore accounts, and each day the folder of evidence grew heavier. Keith was indispensable. He gave himself completely to the fight. He spent his days in Harnas's office, answering questions, helping Oscar, signing statements. At night he went back to his empty apartment and called Amber. Not to talk about himself, but to ask about Cody. Was he speaking yet? How was school? There was no fatherly tone in his voice, only quiet, guilty concern. Cody still barely spoke, but he had stopped filling pages with black scribbles. He had started drawing houses. Simple houses, with roofs and windows and chimneys. Amber took it as a good sign. When the evidence was finally complete, Harnas called Amber in. Several thick binders lay on his desk. That's it, he said, tapping the top one. We've got everything. The clinic documents. The nurse's video testimony. Keith's journals. And the cherry on top, her entire financial scam laid bare. Enough to put her away for 10 years. Minimum. He looked at Amber. My advice? Go straight to the prosecutor. We file, attach all of this, and the system takes over. She'll be arrested, there'll be an investigation, a trial. It'll be loud, ugly, but effective. You'll get everything you wanted. And then some. Amber stared at the binders. Prosecutor. Court. Prison. It was logical. It was right. It was justice. But something inside her resisted. Handing these files to some faceless investigator? Letting the system finish what she started? After everything she'd endured? It felt wrong. Too easy. No, she said quietly. Harnas raised his eyebrows. No? You don't want her jailed? After everything she's done? I do, Amber said firmly. But not like that. I don't want to hide behind a prosecutor. I don't want this story buried in the crime section. I want to tell it myself. Harnas steadied her. What are you planning, Amber? And then she saw it. In her news feed, glowing on her phone screen. A bright banner with Patricia's perfectly retouched, smiling face. The headline read, Patricia Lyons leading nominee for Businessperson of the Year. The Businessperson of the Year Award. The city's most prestigious business and society event. The mayor, the governor, bankers, industrialists, the entire elite Patricia loved to dazzle with her power and spotless image. It was the peak of her triumph, the symbol of her untouchability. And Amber understood. That was the perfect finale. Not a suffocating courtroom. A brightly lit stage. Live. This, she said, turning her phone so Harnas could see. The lawyer stared at the banner, then at Amber. His eyes widened in dawning realization. You're insane, he whispered. That's madness. They won't even let you in. And if they do, security will throw you out in seconds. They won't, Amber replied calmly. Not if it's done right. The plan was already forming in her mind. Bold, dangerous, almost impossible. But the only way. She didn't just want justice. She wanted vengeance. Public. Total. She wanted to take from Patricia what mattered most, not her freedom, not her money, but her image. The mask of the noble matriarch. And she wanted to rip it off at the very moment it shone brightest. I'll need your help, she told Harnas. And Keith's. Harnas stared at her for a long moment, then leaned back and laughed. Damn it, Amber. I knew you weren't ordinary. This is the craziest plan I've ever heard. And that's exactly why it might work. I'm in. What followed was a real operation. The first problem, getting into the ceremony. Tickets were personal, assigned months in advance. Guest lists approved by a committee full of Patricia's allies. Here Keith became crucial. Even as an outcast, he had old connections. People who still owed him from his days as the Golden Son. He called dozens. Most hung up. Some refused in fear. But one said yes, a deputy head of a sponsoring bank. He owed Keith a large sum, and instead of demanding repayment, Keith asked for one thing, an invitation. Any name. 3 days later, Amber held a ticket. It wasn't for her. It was for an Anna Smith, assistant to that banker. The seat wasn't in the front, but up in the gallery, at a table for staff and press. But that didn't matter. She would be inside. The next step was preparing the weapon. Amber wasn't going to scream or wave papers around. The strike had to be precise and undeniable. With Harnas and the same tech guy who had filmed Rebecca's testimony, they built a short, devastating presentation. Just 5 slides. The first slide, a scanned copy of the contract with Vitamed, Nathan's and Patricia's names circled in red. The second, a photo from Keith's journal, his note about his mother's special solution. The third, a freeze frame from Rebecca Bowen's video testimony, captioned, I confirm that the procedure was organized by Patricia Lyons without her eldest son's knowledge. The fourth, a simple chart of money transfers from Lyons Construction to shell companies. And the fifth, final slide, a bank statement from one of Patricia's offshore accounts, under her maiden name, showing millions. They loaded it onto a flash drive. Through one of Keith's old contacts, a man working with the technical team running the ceremony, the flash drive ended up with the sound engineer at the main console. For a very generous fee, he promised to switch the signal at the exact moment and throw the presentation up on the giant screens flanking the stage. Everything was set. Amber knew she was risking everything. If it went wrong, she'd be accused of slander, of sabotaging the event. No one would ever listen to her truth again. Patricia, of course, was expecting a strike. But she expected it from prosecutors. She was preparing for a legal war, hiring the best attorneys. She couldn't imagine that the scaffold was already built, not in a courtroom, but on the very stage where she was about to be crowned. On the day of the ceremony, Amber stood in front of the mirror for a long time. She put on a simple black dress. No jewelry. A strict hairstyle. She had to look not like a vengeful ex-daughter-in-law, but like a professional, calm, confident, flawless. She looked at her reflection. A woman stared back at her, a woman she didn't quite recognize. A woman going all in to reclaim her life. She kissed the sleeping Cody and slipped out. She wasn't heading to a celebration. She was heading to her final battle. The golden, light-filled hall of the Philharmonic was packed. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and hypocrisy. Men in tuxedos, women in gowns dripping with jewels. Smiles, handshakes, hushed important conversations. This was Patricia's world. The world she had built. The world where she reigned queen. Amber felt like a stranger there, and that gave her strength. She wasn't a guest. She was the verdict. She found her seat up in the gallery easily. From there, she had a clear view of the stage, the massive screens, the hall itself. She spotted Patricia at the central table, surrounded by the mayor, the governor, the city's most powerful. Patricia wore an emerald gown, her silver hair styled flawlessly. She looked magnificent. She smiled, accepted congratulations, radiating unshakable confidence. Nathan sat beside her, pale and hollow-eyed, like a shadow. For a second, Patricia's eyes met Amber's across the room. Patricia's lips curled in a faint, dismissive smirk. To her, Amber was nothing, a nuisance, a disgraced ex, who had somehow snuck into her triumph. She wasn't afraid of her. And that was her fatal mistake. The ceremony began. The polished host cracked jokes, showered flattery, handed out awards in minor categories. Amber sat still, her heartbeat steady and heavy like a metronome. She felt no fear. Only cold, ringing emptiness. She was ready. Finally, the main moment arrived. The host, voice trembling with drama, announced the Businessperson of the Year award. On the giant screens, a film rolled. A film about Patricia Lyons. Amber watched the montage, Patricia in a hard hat at a construction site, Patricia at a charity gala handing a check to an orphanage, Patricia in old family photos, flanked by a young Keith and Nathan. The voiceover praised her unbreakable will, her contribution to the city, her family values, her flawless reputation. The hall watched, spellbound. It was the perfect lie, broadcast live. The film ended. The room erupted in thunderous applause. "Ladies and gentlemen, Businessperson of the Year, Patricia Lyons," the host proclaimed. Everyone rose. Applause thundered like a storm. Patricia stood, smiling, basking in the glow of her glory. The peak of her life. Her absolute triumph. And that was the moment Amber rose too. Calmly, she slipped past her table and walked down the aisle toward the stage. Toward the nearest floor microphone for questions. No one noticed her, everyone's eyes were fixed on the stage. Patricia mounted the stage, accepted the heavy crystal trophy from the host, and stepped to the microphone to give her speech. The applause began to fade. And then Amber reached the microphone. Her voice, amplified, cut through the last echoes of clapping. "I have only one question for the award winner." Her tone was calm, but it cracked like a gunshot. Silence slammed down. Hundreds of heads turned toward her. The host blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry," he stammered, "questions are part of the program." Patricia froze on stage. The smile slipped from her face. She stared at Amber with confusion and barely concealed irritation. Amber ignored the host. Her eyes were only on Patricia. "Patricia, would you care to comment on a transfer of $800,000 from Vega Consult to a bank account in Cyprus, opened under the name of Patricia Berry in March of last year?" The question was so specific, so unexpected, that the hall fell into dead silence. Patricia turned pale. Her eyes flicked toward the security guards at the stage. She gave them a subtle signal. "I'm sorry, this is clearly some kind of mistake," the host tried again, flustered. "Security, please escort." "Maybe this will refresh your memory," Amber said, loud and clear. That was the signal. The giant screens flanking the stage went black. Then, in the next instant, an image appeared. The first image, the clinic contract. A stifled gasp rippled through the crowd. People in the front rows began whispering. Amber's voice was steady as she narrated. 9 years ago, my son Cody was born through a medical procedure paid for and arranged by Patricia Lyons. The biological father was her younger son, Nathan Lyons. All of this was done behind the back of her elder son, and my husband, Keith. The screen changed. A page from Keith's journal appeared. All this time, Patricia played a monstrous psychological game, convincing her infertile son she was looking for a special solution, while secretly arranging this conspiracy. Another slide. Rebecca Bowen's face, with lines from her testimony. Witnesses who could tell the truth were destroyed. The head nurse of the clinic was fired and blacklisted, losing her chance to work and provide for her family. On stage, Patricia stood frozen like a statue. Her face was ashen. She looked from the screens to the audience, horror in her eyes. Security hesitated, unsure of what to do. But why? Amber continued, her voice cutting sharper. For family? For an heir? No. For money. The screens showed the flowchart of funds. Arrows leading from Lyons Construction to shell companies. For decades, Patricia Lyons siphoned money out of the family business. Millions. The final slide. The bank statement under the name Barry, the total balance circled in red. She stole from her own sons, her shareholders, her partners. She wasn't building a family business. She was building her own secret financial empire. Ladies and gentlemen, here is your real businessperson of the year, a thief and a manipulator. The hall was dead still. No one moved. All eyes were fixed on the stage, on the woman they had just celebrated, and on the damning evidence towering above her. Patricia's power, built on fear, money, and reputation, dissolved in those 2 minutes. Gone under the stage lights. Her colleagues, her allies, even her rivals, all of them saw her stripped bare. Amber was done. She didn't wait for a reaction. She calmly set the microphone back on its stand. The dull thud echoed in the silence. She turned and walked toward the exit. She didn't look at anyone, but she felt the crowd parting for her. She crossed the hall, pushed through the heavy doors, and stepped into the cool night air. She drew a deep breath. It was over. She felt no triumph, no joy, no rage. Only vast, endless relief. She pulled out her phone. On the lock screen was a photo of Cody, laughing in the sunlight, taken just a week before his 9th birthday. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. She hadn't destroyed Patricia. She had simply shown everyone who she truly was. The rest, the world would take care of itself. Amber slipped the phone back into her bag and walked down the quiet street toward home. Toward her son. Toward her new life. And that is how this difficult, emotional story comes to an end, dear friends. A story of terrible betrayal, of a shattered family, but also of the incredible strength of one woman who chose to fight for her son and her dignity to the very end. And like every powerful story, it leaves us with questions. What do you think? Did Amber do the right thing in the end? Was it justice Patricia deserved, or was it cold, merciless revenge that went too far? Can Amber's methods be justified? After all, she used blackmail and public humiliation to win. Or was that the only way to fight someone like Patricia, using her own weapons against her? And what about Keith? Did he earn the chance at redemption Amber gave him? Who do you think was the true monster in this story? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. Let's discuss. A story lives as long as people talk about it. If this story moved you, if you felt for Amber and her son all the way to the end, please support our channel by liking this video. Your support is the best reward we could ask for. And of course, subscribe, because more gripping stories, full of passion and unexpected twists, are on the way. We wish you warmth, peace in your families, and only good experiences. All the best to you. At the end of this video, you'll see a box pop up in the middle of your screen. Click it, and you'll find more of our most powerful stories.